Welcome back to the third in a three-part series of Leading in Crisis, the three S's that help us to navigate these days of crisis. I'm Major Dr. Joanne Holz. I'm the director of the Jack McDowell School for Leadership in Atlanta, Georgia, part of the Evangeline Booth College. And today we want to talk about the last of the three S's being stimulation. Now, over the course of the last 2 weeks, we've spoken about the need for security and the need for structure. And today we want to finally talk about the need for stimulation. You know, when we live our lives in a robust way, it has so much that stirs our mind and our body and our spirit. Most people choose to occupy their days in ways that allow them to earn a living wage, that give us the opportunity to contribute to the lives of other people, an opportunity to find a creative outlet in some way, and generally we like to have some kind of a slot in our lives where we can help solve meaningful problems. Now, many of our Salvation Army officers on the front line have been engaged in those things right now, in a little bit overwhelming way, because we are in days that don't have a pattern to help us know how to engage what's going on outside. But generally speaking, when life is lived in a normal, paced sort of way, these are important contributing attributes to our day that give us stimulation and help us to enjoy the life that we have. Now, the retirement of Charles, and you'll remember that we are basing our conversation around a conversation that my friend had with a retiree, and she was getting ready to retire, looking for what is this going to look like? What do I need to be aware of? And out of that conversation, she has extracted these three S's. The retirement of Charles cut him off, if you will, from his sources of stimulation. He was intentional in creating new ways to keep himself interested and interesting. And the isolation of these days, where we find ourselves in this COVID-19 environment, is not chosen for us. This is not retirement, but it has many of the characteristics of retirement. It's happened to us without warning or without preparation, and yet, like the environment of retirement, we can be intentional about staying vibrant. So what do we do? Well, the suggestion is that we connect, we challenge, and we cheer. Well, the idea of connecting comes to mind for most of us, first of all, as we connect with other people. And that has been one of the things I have watched take place in more intentional ways these days. Many are using social media much more than they did in the past. And we text, we email, we use Facebook, we use Zoom for meetings and parties and reunions and worship services. It's also important to remember to connect with those who are not as tech savvy and call them to chat with them or drop them a card or a note so that they know we are thinking about them. But connecting with people has been something that I have watched take place in more intentional ways over these days. In fact, my own family has now experienced 2 virtual online reunions, and they've been delightful times catching up with each other, watching the kids as they cross the camera and so forth. And it's been a delightful time for us. But connection is more than just connecting with people. Because of the drama of this disease, we must be intentional about connecting this moment with other moments in our lives, because this pandemic is not the whole story. We must look at our own personal pasts and look at our institutional histories to create connections that give context for our lives today. And actually, as we do that, we can project a reasoned future. In what ways are we going to choose to use the lessons that we are learning to inform how we want to live the days ahead? Perhaps one of them is that idea of connecting with people. You've been too busy to do that, but you realize the importance of it. And so the lesson of this season will help you. Perhaps the manner in which we are reaching people in the church is a lesson for us that we want to take into the future. So the dot of today can be a meaningful space on the lines of our tomorrows. We not only want to connect, but we want to challenge. You know, days of isolation don't have to be days off from living. We can choose our challenges and find motivation and energy in a host of options. There are people who are reading more these days. There are people who are doing things like puzzles and singing and making music. I'm so enjoying these virtual choirs that are coming from places where we never expected them to come. And singing is a wonderful way of navigating through times of crisis. In fact, the Psalms is full of people who have learned to sing. How can we sing the songs of Zion in a foreign land? The Jews exclaimed. And yet, God gave songs in those times. I realize that was a taunt to them. But the reality is, the music in our heart gives witness to what God is doing in our lives. So we want to look for ways that singing and making music and all of that can be a stimulation. What we know is that music can actually be a therapy for individuals to retrain brains and heal emotions. So why not use it during this time to help us as we navigate through the responses or our own response to the pandemic? Our senses can also provide an arena for challenge. There was a person that I'm aware of who is now completing crossword puzzles, even the difficult ones. And some have taken up baking and using this time to recreate recipes from their family history. That's a tactile kind of adventure we have to do, and we use our senses to do that. We can look at wide vistas as well as individual blossoms as we walk and bicycle for exercise. We can smell the coffee and realize how rich the aroma is and how grateful we are that we've not lost the sense of smell that can be associated at times with this virus. So finding sensory challenge and joy in the world is in some measure an individual choice. In American history, John Adams, we're told, found travel by sea to be monotonous, but his wife Abigail rather enjoyed the journeys on the water. There are several who, when they're on cruises, simply overlook from the balcony or from a railing the beauty of the sea, and they begin to see shades of color that they had never noticed before, because they have taken time to pull back and to experience the loveliness of the world that we live in. There are also challenges related to our spirit, and these can be difficult to navigate, but we can use this time to deepen our spiritual lives, our time with God. It was interesting to me that Queen Elizabeth II of England addressed this thought, not specifically from a Christian viewpoint or only from a Christian viewpoint, but she addressed it in a rare speech given during the height of the crisis. And though self-isolating may at times be hard, she says, many people of all faiths and of none are discovering that it presents an opportunity to slow down, pause, and reflect in prayer or meditation. The BBC News gave witness to Queen Elizabeth's speech, and those words are true for us during this time of isolation, where we can slow down, pause, and reflect. And the beauty for us is that we know God, we know Him. Well, finally, we can be cheerful. Happiness is a choice. If you decide to be happy, no pandemic can alter that. No pandemic can stop you from a personal sense of delight. Yes, there are moments of grief, and yes, there are moments of fear. And we ask those hard questions. What if those I love fall ill? When will this thing end? What about my job? Why did all of this happen? And then there's also the anger that we feel. We don't deserve this. But in the midst of it all, there's much to rejoice about. So perhaps we might all go back to the advice of Mr. Rogers' mother, where she said to him, look for the helpers. And in watching the acts of bravery and generosity from so many helpers across the globe, we can all be not only motivated, but genuinely inspired. My friends, you who are serving on the front lines are among those helpers. And you need to look for your own heroes and helpers as you continue to move forward. Well, let's pull these ideas together. The lack of knowledge about the novel coronavirus has made everyone uneasy. The widespread contagion that caused the label pandemic to be attached to our current situation is devastating. We must acknowledge that our lives have been significantly altered and will probably be altered all the way into our future. The retirement that we talked about as kind of a model for what we're looking at now can change life. For Charles, it was a happy transition because he was intentional about making sure he was secure, that he had structure, and that he had stimulation. So perhaps if we use the same 3 S's to guide our adjustment to COVID-19 and to think into the change that's ahead of us, we can find some benefit to this particular time for ourselves. And we can navigate these days with grace, with gratitude, and knowing that God is a very present help in our time of trouble. God bless you. We trust that these thoughts will help you to recenter, will give you some inspiration for the day, and will allow some transformation as you think through those areas in your own life where you need to do life a little bit differently for yourself, for your family, for your church, for your loved ones, for your friendships. Let's be guided by security, structure, and stimulation as we submit these thoughts to what God wants us to do with them in the days ahead. God bless you. Next week, join us. We will be having a time with Dr. Karen Harula, and she will be helping us to navigate a little bit differently as we continue on with our Leading in Crisis series. God bless you. We'll see you next week.